concerned that the life and property of all foreign residents are safe, guaranteed, and will be protected. The new government looks forward to continuing friendly relationships with all countries.
Well, that was how the people of Grenada.
Right. So that was the song on the radio. So it was Radio Grenada, when the revolution took place, it was Radio Free Grenada. So that was the bulletin. It was called bulletins at the time. The announcements that was coming across the radio, alerting Grenadians that the country was under new leadership, and of course in the, if you listen, reiterating the message that all on island, including the foreigners, we know that there were SGU students on island, was safe, right? And there was no need for them to fear for their lives. They would be kept safe, right? So that was the announcement on the radio on March 13th. So let's talk a little bit more about the plan and the strategy. So the plan and the strategy, it was a plan of deception and diversion. So it was called the 2D plan, a plan for deception and diversion. So the plan really was to deceive Gary. No, Eric Gairy was off island, so to deceive him and deceive his leadership, and of course divert the effort of his forces. So, many of you would have grown up hearing about the Mongoose Gang, right? Which was a critical part of Gary's leadership. He had what was called the Mongoose Gang, which was a group of individuals who protected and served to protect Gary's reign in Grenada. So, the the plan also included diverting the efforts of the Mongoose Gang and other Gary forces that were stationed across the island, protecting government buildings and assets. So the leaders of the coup, which was included, as I said, Maurice Bishop, Bernard Coard, Unison Whiteman, Hudson Austin, Edward Lynn, they were all, it was a plan of how to deceive and also divert the efforts to, of course, conquer rule leadership of the island. So we have another video here that I'll just play for you. So this here was the True Blue Barracks. So that's what you're seeing there. That's the True Blue Barracks, which was destroyed on March 13th. So it was burnt down, and that was part of the actions that took place. The white flag that was at police stations across Grenada. The white flag was put up as a flag of surrender when the police stations, 35 police stations, came under um, leadership of the cool leaders. That's the radio station, Radio Grenada, Radio Free Grenada. So just to go back a little. So this was the radio station. So this became the main communication headquarters of the revolution, Radio Grenada.
We had received information on the Saturday before the Tuesday that the
The song is
intention of
a
the
little
government was
low,
to
but
search us and
hopefully you
detain
can
us.
hear.
We decided to go underground. While we were underground, more information came to us on the Monday morning that the plan was that Gary was going to flee the country, leaving orders to have our leadership killed. We therefore, around 3 o'clock, summoned a council meeting of our top cadres. And there and then, the decision was taken that we should move rather than wait to be killed.
People have tried to get rid of me, and I don't think they can make it. Lots of them who have tried are lying in the cemetery.
So this was Eric Matthew Gairy, who at the time, of course, he was off island, but leading
Natural
up to
causes.
March 13th, there was always threats on his life, right? That he was going to be, his leadership was going to be overthrown. So that's what he was mentioning right there in the video, right? He was always aware of threats on his rule of Grenada.
All it says is the radio guard's compound. Well, this isn't a compound, it's a roadblock. All this comprised of
Roadblocks were set up, so there were roadblocks set up
You've taken
across the
power,
island.
pulled the gun, as it were. When do you expect to be able to hold elections?
We are hoping that that process will be completed fairly soon. We are about to get involved in the question of enumerating the list of voters, which is, of course, a necessary prerequisite to the holding of fair and free elections.
So the elections were never held, right? So that was one of the downfalls of the or the mistakes of the revolution. They didn't never enacted a democratic process where they would have called an elections and democratically elected a government. They remained a coup. For the duration of 1979 to 1983, never officially forming a formal government, so to speak, and this eventually caught the attention of, course, the United States, who always looking for protection of democracy, especially in its backyard, North America and the whole northwestern hemisphere. Right, so that was one of the real drawbacks that Maurice Bishop and his set of lead folks who are accompanying him never moved towards a democratic government, which of course would have made the revolution
I think
last
you probably have
way
some
longer
questions
if
yourself.
they
Yeah.
did move
Yes,
to
but
having
But we wanted to come to the
democracy.
point.
give us permission just to go out and
Right,
take a
so
few shots
they
at the
remained
radio
a
station.
socialist
Sure.
government or communist
We haven't seen it
government,
ourselves, but you
and
will be seeing it with
we
us.
know today
Okay,
only
thank you.
We
Cuba
are very
remains
intrigued,
a
as I have been
communist
hearing some very
government
interesting
within
stories.
Thank you.
I'm
the
sure you
the
enjoy it
Caribbean.
yourself.
Thank you.
Bernard, Uni, let's go.
So of course I just wanted to show that video there so you could get a see. It's always good to show the visual elements what Grenada looks like on March 13th, 1979. Of course you would have seen uh some of the elements I will discuss here right now in terms of some of the events that played out on March 13th, Tuesday, March 13th, 1979. So, of course, I said this is a snapshot of learning, something short. If you do and you are interested in learning more, there's lots of content on YouTube about the Grenada Revolution. You can check out our YouTube channel and look at our playlist there. Or if you just Google Grenada Revolution, there's lots of content out there. So this is just a snapshot. We know people are busy, but this is important in terms of Grenada's history and heritage. So, one of the major events that took place on that fateful Tuesday, March 13th, was the seizing of police stations across the island. So, that was in fact part of the plan. The plan of deception and diversion that was organized by Maurice Bishop and his group of NGM folks, right? So there were about 35 police stations across the island, and the plan and the goal was to take seize the 35 police stations, take them over uh, in an effort, of course, to take over the entire country. As police stations were seized, each there was a white flag that was raised with signal that that police station had surrendered. So the officers they surrendered to the NGM and the leaders of the coup, right? So a white flag. So in the video I would have shown you, would have seen the white flag, right? So a white flag, which was the symbol of surrender, and it's always the symbol of surrender, and it remains the symbol of surrender today in any, especially during war, anything like that, was raised at each police station. But the seizing of the police stations was one of, as I said, the strategy and tactics employed by Maurice Bishop and the leaders of the revolution in their efforts to take over Grenada and, of course, really begin the revolutionary process. So that's key, right? The police station, police stations, and those in well, in social studies, police stations, the police stations are there to serve and protect the citizens, right? So taking the police station was symbolic in terms of the police station is now under control of the coup leaders, and of course, it meant that the protection of the country was now in the hands of those who had taken over um, leadership of leadership of the police stations, which was Maurice Bishop, as I said, Bernard Coard, and those men there. So the second was the burning of the True Blue Barracks. So the True Blue Barracks was burned down, and the True Blue Barracks was the headquarters of a lot of Gary's military forces, if you want to say military, quote unquote. So the barracks were burned down on True Stretch. There was where they were located, and it meant that Gary forces, they are dismantled when those barracks were burnt down. Right. So again, another tactic employed by the coup leaders to really take hold of Grenada on that fateful March 13th day. So the burning of the Chulu barracks, as the video would have shown, the barracks were burnt completely to ground, only galvanized remaining, right? Everything was burnt down, and I said it was the central quarters of where Gary military forces were being housed and held, right? So that was a critical piece to take over, right? The barracks. Radio Grenada. So Radio Grenada, which was the only radio station in Grenada at the time, was captured, and Radio Grenada became the communication headquarters for the those who took over Grenada on March 13th. So when they took over Radio Grenada, they immediately renamed it Radio Free Grenada, and it became the communication headquarters. And the radio station really served as the voice of the revolution, right? So messages or bulletins, as it was called, were broadcasted on a daily basis from Radio Free Grenada, right? So that was another critical point or tactic to have the radio station and to be able to use it for communication. And it became the main headquarters, as mentioned. Hubbard Blaze. So Hubbard Blaze would become and just a little extra history for those who don't know. So Hubbard Blaze would become the first prime minister after the revolution. So when the revolution ended in 1983, we know the U.S. invasion was in October 1983. In 1984, so early January 1984, Howard Blaze became the first prime minister following the revolution, and the prime minister um, put in power by a democratic process of election. So elections were held in 1984 and Howard Blaze became the prime minister. So just a little bit of extra history for those who were unaware. But going back to Radio Grenada, Howard Blaze delivered the first address to the nation on March 13th on Radio Free Grenada, basically telling people, and those words are quoted throughout history, Grenada's history. These are the words delivered by Hubert Blaze. Attention, attention, attention. People of Grenada, the government of the criminal dictator Eric Gairy has been overthrown. Right? So those words are um, ingrained in our history as the words delivered by Hubert Blaze on March 13th, alerting the entire Grenadian population that the country had been taken over. The Eric Matthew government had been overthrown, right? Eric Matthew Gary had been overthrown, right? So that is a critical piece, right? So as I said, the radio station was used as a critical um, tactic in communicating to the masses or to the public at the time about what was taking place as they began to take over the country and instill themselves as the new leaders of Grenada. The Polish training school was also captured, so that was another significant event of the March 13th. So the Polish training school was captured. So again, decreasing the powers of protection and those there to protect Grenada on the Gary government side. The arrest of Gary ministers. So on March 13th, the arrest of Gary ministers. So Gary's ministers, including his wife, so Eric Matthews' Gary wife was Cynthia Gary, and she as well surrendered. So all Gary ministers, they were brought to the Radio Free Grenada headquarters, and they were arrested and they were brought there to the radio station headquarters, and they surrendered. When they surrendered, each broadcasted a message on the radio letting the people know that they had surrendered. Right, so all Gary's ministers, again, Gary was out of the country at the time, believed to be in New York, and his ministers, the tactic put in place by Maurice Bishop and the other leaders of the revolution was to round up all Gary's ministers and arrest them and bring them to Radio Free Grenada, where each broadcasted a message of surrender to the public. So that was another key part of the events of March 13th, Tuesday, March 13th, 1979. Phone lines. So once they took over the radio station, they installed phone lines. So about 15 phone lines were installed at Radio Free Grenada, and the purpose of the phone lines really was to increase communication. So it was a method for people, Grenadians, to call into the phone and tell Maurice Bishop and the other coup leaders about where Gary forces was stationed, and so that they can master up their own forces to go and take and capture them or arrest them. Right? So that was what the phone lines were used for. So that was a critical part as well of the tactic to install those phone lines at Radio Free Grenada, of course, to get communication about where Gary's forces were across the island. Right, where exactly people were seeing them. So most of these messages came through secret codes, right? And people would call in and see where Gary's forces were, and that would send out the the coup leaders would have sent out their own forces to capture them, right? And when we talk about Gairy forces, mostly of these people were the Mongoose gang, what was known as the Mongoose gang, right? So that was another critical part of the tactics of March 13th, 1979, the phone lines being installed. So before we come to our Maurice Bishop first speech, let's take in a video.
March 30th is one of the most significant events in Grenada's history for what it set out to do, for what it became, and for how it has impacted Grenada's history ever since. It began an event or period that has really brought about some huge changes in not just physical changes on the ground, but a lot of psychological changes among Grenadians.
On March 13th, 1979, Grenada became the first English-speaking Caribbean country to have had a revolution, meaning where the government was overthrown.
So they took the decision to stage a coup against Eric Gairy's government. And on the morning, they attacked the Grenada Defense Force barracks at True Blue, and they burnt it to the ground, scattering all the soldiers. And they took control of Radio Grenada, Radio Lionel as they used to call it, and basically began the process of the Grenada Revolution.
And I can recall that morning hearing the voice on Radio Grenada. This is Radio Free Grenada. Announcing that they are now Radio Free Grenada. And the People's Revolutionary Government has taken over, and so on and so forth. And it was a very solemn but scary time.
They called on people, the police and members of the Gairy government, to relinquish power, do not try to put up a fight, and they called on the police stations to surrender. And throughout the day of March 13th, many of the police stations, most of the police stations basically, many of them abandoned or either just walked away from the police station, allowing the NJM members to take over. March 13th represents a very interesting period in Grenada's history because the support that it received was across the board, and for the first time, many people believed that they were participating in something much bigger than themselves. I think people really felt a part of a movement. They felt a part of change, and many people initially welcomed that change because they wanted to be part of it. There's lots of good and bad about the Grenada Revolution, which we continue to argue about. But I think many people still regard key aspects of it as being important in Grenada's history and made a definite impact on people's lives. One of the problems we're seeing today is that many Grenadians do not know about the history of March 13th or the Grenada Revolution. So recently, the Grenada National Museum Press published a series of 34 books as part of the Grenada Chronicles series, looking at the period from 1970 all the way to 1983. This was compiled by Ann Wilder for the Grenada National Museum, and these are available on Amazon. This is something I think that's really valuable if you want to learn about the Grenada Revolution.
Right, so that's their additional information about the events of March 13th. And of course, if you're interested in learning more, you could definitely check out those books. If you're in the US or in Canada, check out Amazon and they have those books there. So Maurice Bishop first speech. So when Maurice Bishop on March 14th, that would have been Wednesday, March 14th, Maurice Bishop would have delivered his first address to Grenada as the new um, Prime Minister of Grenada, imposed Prime Minister of Grenada on March 14th. And in that speech, what stays with us today in history, there was lots of aspects of that speech, but he reminded Grenadians the reason for the revolution. So the people of Grenada, this revolution is for work, for food, for decent housing and health services, and for a bright future for our children and great grandchildren. And those lines today remain in history. There, it's imprinted in many of the books and publications written about the Grenada Revolution and about Maurice Bishop himself, right? That was the reason for the revolution, right? It was seen as a period of change and need to change so that for better um, quality of life for Grenadians. So I just wanted to share a bit of that. Of course, if you're interested in more of Bishop's speech, it is on YouTube. You can just Google Maurice Bishop and some of his speeches would come up. But I just wanted to highlight here on March 14th, which would have been a Wednesday, the day after the fateful March 13th, he delivered his first address to the nation, and these were the words that remain with us today as the reason put forward for the revolution. Okay, I should have another video here, so let me just bring it up while we wait. I'm really hoping that folks are finding this program very educational, or this session.
The Caribbean island of Grenada, a paradise for tourists, but now the center of the world's latest coup d'etat. It happened on March the 13th, when a revolutionary party overthrew the government of Prime Minister Sir Eric Gairy.
That's the true blue barracks I talked about, so that
it all
was
began at 6
down.
o'clock in the morning, when a solitary barracks guard was lured away by a young woman who sympathized with the opposition party.
The white flag
Groups
at
of
the
men
police
moved
station.
in, seized the armory, and took the sleeping soldiers by surprise. The raiding party donned army uniforms and moved onto the radio station. The guards were quickly overpowered, and the first bulletin from the People's Revolutionary Government was broadcast. The coup, which only took a few hours, was carried out by the New Jewel movement. Its members are mostly young, left-wing lawyers and intellectuals. The group formed 7 years ago and quickly won widespread public support to challenge Sir Eric Gairy's Grenada United Labour Party. Their leader is a 34-year-old London-trained barrister, Maurice Bishop, now Grenada's self-imposed Prime Minister. He told the press what made him strike when he did.
When he led the revolution, so very young, 34 years old, a lawyer.
To search us and detain us. We decided to go underground. While we were underground, more information came to us on the Monday morning that the plan was that Gairy was going to flee the country, leaving orders to have our leadership killed. We therefore, around 3 o'clock, summoned a council, a meeting of our top cadres, and there and then the decision was taken that we should move rather than wait to be killed.
So the decision was made on the Monday morning, March 13th, to move, right? It was a state of either
after
moving
200 years
or
of British rule,
being
the island
killed,
gained its
right?
independence
So they chose
and raised
to
its
move,
own flag for
right?
the first time.
Maurice Bishop and his group chose to move.
But the Grenadians themselves had doubts about what exactly they were celebrating, for the island had stumbled into independence in the middle of a general strike. Britain too had her doubts and alerted a warship to stand by to evacuate foreigners in case of violence. But Eric Gairy had got what he wanted and happily danced the night away in the company of his supporters.
That was Eric Gairy back in the day in one of his party celebrations. So that was the allegation from 1974 to 1979. There was lots of celebration and
Gairy had an unshakable belief in his own leadership and authority.
the
But for the
leadership
people of
of
Grenada,
Gairy during
the
that time was
strikes,
brought
riots
into
and street
question on many
demonstrations that had
occasions.
disfigured the island from the end of 1973 were an inauspicious prologue to full independence.
So that was St. George's back in the day.
The port had been shut for a month, so food and
So here
fuel
would
were
have been like
scarce.
where Foodland is
Essential
today
services were paralysed.
in St.
Shops had
George's.
closed down because of rioting and heavy looting. Demonstrations were a daily event, as hundreds of Grenadians called for the resignation of the government. Previously, Gairy had backing from those who had done well from his friendship, notably the Agricultural Workers' Union. Gairy had forced plantation owners to double agricultural wages. It was with the farm workers' support that the Premier had won a large majority in the elections held 2 years earlier. But even the agricultural workers were striking at the time of independence. Banana and cocoa bean plantations were overgrown. Nutmegs, Grenada's main export, were going rotten on the ground. Everyone striking had to try to live off his savings. The country was going bankrupt, but Gairy hung on, and his persistence was rewarded.
Some of this is like a
In 1976, his party won 9 out of 15 seats, rubber stamping another 5-year extension of his 25-year domination of the island's politics. Also in 76, South Korea gave him an honorary doctorate in exchange for exclusive offshore fishing rights. In 77, the Queen of England gave him a knighthood. Internationally, he's exposed himself to ridicule when giving annual speeches at the United Nations about flying saucers, in which he firmly believes. He's even been called the Idi Amin of the Caribbean by some critics. There are said to have been attempts on his life, but at this press conference in 1974, Gairy didn't seem too concerned.
People have tried to get rid of me, and I don't think they can make it. Lots of them who have tried are lying in the cemetery.
How did they die, Prime Minister?
How are they doing?
How did they die?
Natural causes.
Gairy managed to keep power in 1974 with the help of his secret police, or Mongoose
Yes, so that was the Mongoose gang,
They arrested Maurice Bishop only 7 hours before independence because they found at his home telescopic rifle sights, ammunition, camping equipment and plans of Gairy's house. Shortly before his arrest, Bishop was spelling out doom for Grenada's government.
But there is still lots of people in Grenada today that remember the stories of the Mongoose gang and what they did during Gairy's reign.
There's a great deal of division. People are talking about the possibility of civil war, that sort of thing.
The tables have now been turned, and today it's Mr. Bishop searching the home of the former Prime Minister.
And that was the home of Eric Gairy.
The official residence was the last place to fall for the revolutionary forces. And according to the new government, it was ransacked and looted by Gairy's own men before being taken over. Gairy himself was in New York at the time of the coup. Among the findings was evidence of Gairy's interest in voodoo and witchcraft.
And these were
the new regime claims that Eric used his position to build up extensive property holdings, including this nightclub.
Yeah,
they say he gave free tickets for a night on the town to people who did him favors. The policies of Bishop's new government are likely to reflect the left-wing stance of its members. Mr. Bishop and several of his associates have in the past identified strongly with Third World causes, and they've expressed admiration for the Cuban Revolution. There's been concern that Mr. Bishop may not be the right leader for Grenada, a traditionally peaceful island, with the inhabitants having little interest in the Black Power movement, which has led to unrest in other Caribbean countries. The success of the revolution is being closely monitored by the other islands in the area.
Right, so So that's a bit about a video. I just wanted to show you some of the points I'd mentioned in the presentation, that you actually got to see it, right? Of course, more video content, as I said, it's always on YouTube. But I just wanted to show you the True Blue Barracks that was burned down, the white flag of surrender, and that story about what happened on the morning of Monday, March 13th, 1979. Um, when the decision was made to move or to be killed. It was one way or the other, and Maurice Bishop with Bonner Coard and Whiteman and Hudson and all these others decided to move instead of to be killed by Gairy, even though Gairy was out of the country at the time. So I showed the video. So in terms of books, folks who are interested in learning more, doing your own reading, these are two recommended books that you can read in terms of more information about the Grenada Revolution. So we move tonight, The Making of the Grenada Revolution by Joseph Edward Lane. So Joseph Lane is one of the members of the 17 that was arrested and was in jail for many years. So upon his release, he wrote a book, so you can check it out. I have it here myself. You can purchase it on Amazon, Amazon.com if you're in the US, or Amazon.ca if you are in Canada. So it's a good book, and it tells you about the build up to March 13th and when the decision was made to move. Excellent book. The next one is Sky Red, A Tale of Two Revolutions. And this book was written by, of course, Bernard Coard himself. So Bernard Coard would later go on to assassinate Maurice Bishop and stayed many years in jail for that crime. But he wrote a book, Sky Red, A Tale of Two Revolutions. And of course, in there is the account of the events of March 13th, 1979. Again, it's available on Amazon.com or Amazon.ca. And I have it here. Right, Skyred, A Tale of Two Revolutions. So you can, if you're interested in more details and direct information for those who are there, you can check out those two books for